Okay, so I have y equals sine theta over 4 minus 3 pi over 4. Right next to it, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the general equation. Y equals a sine b theta minus c plus d. So then I have y equals, I'm going to just rewrite the problem here for you. Instead of writing theta over 4, I'm going to write it as 1/4 theta, because that means the same thing, minus 3 pi over 4, and that's it. So let's go ahead and identify our variables. Right now, there's no number in front, so there's an imaginary 1. It's never 0, it's 1. Our b value is 1/4. Our c value is 3 pi over 4. And we don't have a d value, so our d value is just 0. That means that the midline is just at the x-axis. So let's use our amplitude. Our amplitude is 1, so I know the top of my sandwich is going to be at +1. And that is my maximum. The bottom of my sandwich is going to be -1, which is my minimum. And I know my graph is going to be sandwiched in between those two lines. Let's go ahead and figure out what the period is. So the period is given by the letter t. T equals 2 pi over b. We found that the b is 1/4, so 2 pi divided by 1/4, which looks kind of funky, so let's rewrite it like this, 2 pi divided by 1/4. Remember, when you divide, you're really multiplying the reciprocal, or 4 over 1, or just 4. So then you get 8 pi. So it's going to take 8 pi to complete one cycle. Now, before we actually graph it, we have to see if there's a phase shift, because normally the sine graph would go all the way starting at 0, right? And this means that it would end at 8 pi. But we have to see if there's a phase shift. To figure out the phase shift, you need to set the quantity you have in parentheses equal to 0. So 1/4 theta minus 3 pi over 4, we're going to set this guy equal to 0. You want to get theta by itself. Don't let this fool you, this is just a number, so if it's minus 3 pi over 4, to move it to the other side, you're taking the opposite, which is positive. Those guys cancel out. So you get 1/4 theta equals 0 plus 3 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. To get theta completely by itself, we're going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 4. Those guys cancel out. Those guys cancel out. My theta equals 3 pi. Notice that it's positive, so that means my phase shift is to the right. So now let's take a look at our graph. Instead of starting at 0, this time we're starting at 3 pi because of my phase shift. So there's 3 pi. That's where my graph is going to start. Now we said the period is 8 pi. So 3 pi plus 8 pi is 11 pi. So that's where one cycle of my graph is going to end. Now, between 3 pi and 8 pi, the midpoint here is going to be 7 pi, that's right in the middle. So I'm going to draw another dot. This is just to help me graph. The midpoint between 3 pi and 7 pi is 5 pi, so I'm going to draw a dot up top on my max. The midpoint between 7 pi and 11 pi is 9 pi, so I'm going to draw a dot that's on my minimum. Because remember, we know that the sine function is a wave like that. Then you're going to go ahead and connect your graph. And then, of course, you can always continue it this way. That is how you graph the function there. Okay, the second question I have is this one right here. Y equals 4 sine theta minus pi over 4 plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and write down the original. And then underneath it, I'll write down the problem. So 4 sine theta minus pi over 4 plus 1. The a value here is 4. Your b value, there's no number in front of the theta, so we assume there's an imaginary 1. C equals pi over 4. Our d value is this 1. So let's take a look at the graph. Your d value is going to tell you where the midline is. So at positive 1, I'm going to go ahead and draw a dotted line. That is the midline. The amplitude is going to tell you the height of the curve. So from 1, if I go up 4, I'm going to be at 5. So I'm going to draw another horizontal line. This is called my maximum. And then from the midline, I'm going to go down 4, giving me the value of -3. That is going to give you your minimum. So now you have the template for your graph. Next thing you want to do is look at your b value to figure out your period, or your t. Your period is 2 pi over b. Well, we said our b value is 1. 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. So it's going to take 2 pi to complete one cycle. Before you graph, you now need to figure out your phase shift. To figure out phase shift, you are going to take whatever you have in the parentheses and set this equal to 0. So theta minus pi over 4 equal to 0. You want to get theta by itself. Remember, pi over 4 is just a number. So if it's minus, you do plus to both sides. Those guys cancel out. Theta equals pi over 4. Notice that it is positive, so that means my phase shift is going to be to the right. So let's go ahead and bring this all together. Pi over 4, our phase shift. Pi over 4 is right between 0 and pi over 2. So remember, I'm starting it on my midline of 1. And I know that the period is 2 pi, so it's going to take 2 pi to complete one full cycle. So there's 2 pi. I'm going to move over to the right 1 because of my phase shift. So from here to here, that's 2 pi. I'm going to go ahead and draw the midpoint. The midpoint is going to be between these two guys here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my midpoint is right there. So it's going to go something like this. The midpoint between these two guys is down here. The midpoint between these two guys is up here. So my graph is going to go up all the way to the max, and then all the way down to the min. And that's one cycle of my graph. Of course, you can continue it up and then down this way, but you don't have to. You can always just draw me one cycle. That's fine.